to burn incense to a false god. Said, I don't believe in any future promise of Israel that you have for us whatsoever. See, Jeremiah was a prime example that we're going to do things in this world by the commandment of the Lord that we really don't want to do. You talk about a hard message to preach to people. You talk about a hard message to preach to people. And we see that in chapter 20, that something happens to Jeremiah that's never happened to him before. The personal, physical persecution of mankind. And he's preaching the gospel, and he's prophesying what God had said. And they grab this man and they throw him in stocks. They beat him up a little bit and put him in stocks. And immediately he begins to cry out in weakness. The primary text that we had this evening. He said in chapter 20, verse 9, he said, Then I said, I will not make mention of him anymore, nor speak anymore in his name. Jeremiah pretty much said, Lord, you go find somebody else to do it because I'm tired of doing what you're telling me to do. I'm tired of preaching the word when I get nowhere and I'm met with strife and malice and envy and vengefulness. That's what I'm met with every time I come to this place. Every time I go to Jerusalem, anytime I'm around the surrounding neighborhood, I always am given lip service by people, but yet they hate my name. Amen. And I'm tired of this. Lord, you go find somebody else because this guy's done. First time he was ever met with true opposition physically, he begins to swear God's name and saying, I'm done with this. But in the same breath, this is how good God really is. He can look past all of my inabilities. He can look past all the thoughts that I've had. He can look past everything that I don't think I can do. He can find me in times when I'm short-tempered and I just kind of spew off and I don't mean what I said. In the same breath, this is what he says. And we're going to read the entire verse again. Then I said, I will not make mention of him nor speak anymore in his name. But. Don't you love that conjunction? But. His word was in mine heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. This is the third burning that we see about. The burning of Topheth, the burning of incense. Now we're talking about an interpersonal burning of the Spirit of God that dwells inside of us today. He says, but his word was in mine heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. There are some things in this world that are not made to stay in. And the Holy Spirit is one of them. The Holy Spirit is not made to come in and just stay inside of me. He has to get out some way, shape, or form in the evidence of my life that is witnessed by the blood of Christ. He has to get out as a living testament and testimony to a world that knows nothing about him. If I keep him shut in, eventually that feeling's going to die. Everything's going to die inside. If I do absolutely nothing with the Father, I do nothing with the Holy Spirit, I do nothing with the commandments that he has, I would say, Lord, you go find somebody else. But there was something inside that burned in my bones. You ever been in a service so strong where the Spirit went from person to person? It was just a dead service until somebody heard the word and the calling of God. Mine was always when I was 12 sitting on that front row and 200-year-old Mrs. Long sit right behind me. And boy, whenever you felt the bony hands go across your shoulders and she let out a woo so long and loud, and that just went through fire throughout the church. And then there's Betty Beavers on this side, and there's Russ Satterfield right here, and then there's Debbie Williams back here, and it goes like wildfire, a fire that cannot be contained because you can't stop the Holy Spirit of God. He is going to steamroll down through the years, generation after generation. Whether one person gets saved in the next 50 years and God comes back, he is still going to steamroll this earth, and the clutches of death and hell and sin are still in the Master's hands because the fire of God cannot be contained. And he said, I feel something that I don't know what to do with. I've heard everything I just said. You ever say something and regret it that you just said it? I can say Jeremiah was in the same boat. Boy, I wish I hadn't said what I just did, because I feel the dwelling of the ashes that started out there by the bronze altar, that made its way into the altar of incense, that got burned and is going on its way up into the nostrils of God. I feel a burning such as that, so deep in my bones, I feel like I'm going to be consumed. I love it when the Spirit comes in droves and waves in such strong moments of church services and even outside. I love it when He comes in such miraculous ways, because I can't contain Him. I don't want to contain Him. I just want to keep Him. I want to keep Him but not contain Him. Father, do what You would have for me, because I want the fire to consume everything that I have. Paul said it so greatly. He said, man, I say things I shouldn't, and I don't say things I should, and I'm just the chiefest of all sinners. Even the patriarchs of the Bible knows what we're talking about, because they lived it. But Lord, let that fire burn up anything that I could ever create within myself, because exactly what we said earlier. What was the rise and fall of Nebuchadnezzar? The rise and fall. It's when he looked out over all of his city and he said, look what I have done. And it said that very moment did God strike him to where he ate as an oxen in the field for 7 years and grew fingernails like the talons of eagles. And for 7 years did he have that mindset. And then after 7 years he looked up and he recognized who God was. Do I think Nebuchadnezzar will be in heaven? There's a possibility. Because he recognized who God was, and all was restored back to him in his senses. Never do I want to say that I can do anything without the help of God, because I will fall, and great will be. Pride go before the fall. Pride go before the fall. Jeremiah, go down to Topheth, a place of burning. You will be in the belly of the fire, and prophesy something that is not popular. Prophesy something that you will be scorned for. But my grace is sufficient for you. I will provide for you something that can't be contained. Even in the stocks and the bonds. What did Paul say? He said, I, a prisoner of Jesus Christ. He is the most freest man on the earth when he said, I'm a prisoner of Jesus Christ. I love being a prisoner of Jesus Christ. I love it. Because he tells me not to go somewhere because of good for me. And he helps me even when I don't see. He's my set of eyes. And he said, go down and prophesy to them. And he said, Lord, I'm not going to spare your name anymore. I won't speak it. And then here come the wave of the Lord inside of him to overcome my fear, my capabilities, my inabilities, my selfishness. He comes and it feels like a burning fire in my bones. What did Ezekiel say? Son of man, can these bones live? Only you know. And then I heard bone to bone, and there stood before me a great army before me. You can't speak enough about how good God is. You can't speak enough about how good the presence of His Spirit is that dwells inside. He told the nation of Israel, every house take a lamb for your house. And if you don't have enough people of your house to consume the lamb, go get your neighbors and go get your friends until the sacrifice is completely consumed. That means taste and see that I am good. Eat all of it and drink all of it. It represents His body and it represents His blood. But we have to take it and hold it and keep it in our hands. And let that fire just continue to be uncontained inside of me. Jeremiah, go. You're not going to like it, but I'll bless you for it. I'll keep you. Be faithful. What did Samuel say to Saul? He said, obedience is greater than the sacrifice. Obedience is greater. See, this whole thing with burning of incense, it wasn't to do with the proper incense. It wasn't to do with the proper fire. It wasn't to do with the proper equipment. God wanted his nation to have a proper heart before him. Before him. And that's why Samuel said what he did to Saul. He said, obedience is greater than the sacrifice. Because he had disobeyed God. All the Lord wants out of his churches of today is pure obedience. It don't matter if man says you're right or wrong. It doesn't matter if they're your allies or not. If you got God in your corner, you're going to be just fine. Just fine. Stand with me tonight.